Zadon Electro Ninja here, and welcome back to Electro Ninja's Lab. In today's video, we are going to be discussing one of the greatest shows of my childhood, that of American Dragon. Now, keep in mind that I watched American Dragon after its original runtime. The entire show was already done with, and all of that jazz. But recently, it has returned and is now on Disney Plus. Now, obviously, there's likely never going to be a sequel or anything to it, but for a brief moment, while it's back out again, I'd like to just tell you guys why I love this show. It's honestly a really hard show to actually explain exactly why I love it, but the fact is that it was one of those shows that honestly I just loved at the time. Oh, for those of you who haven't watched American Dragon, basically American Dragon is about Jake Long, which is why he's in the main title as well. Who is the American Dragon. In fact, he is the first American Dragon. And as such, he has a lot of responsibilities put on him, which, needless to say, I'm starting to wonder what the hell they're actually doing. Basically, dragons are considered the guardians of the world, specifically to protect the magical creatures and to keep magical and non-magical worlds separated in order to protect all people living on both sides. Which, honestly, I just find it so interesting, to say the least. Just knowing all of the chaotic things that go into this whole world is insane, to say the least. They actually spent so much time to create this world, and honestly, I love it. Even though a lot of the mythological creatures that you see in this are very similar to their normal selves, it feels like they actually decided to look into the cultures behind each of these different creatures and actually did a lot of really cool stuff with them by making these characters not necessarily specifically focused on one specific aspect, but made each of them actual people. It's honestly so interesting. Honestly, there are a few things that I think could have been better, such as obviously they made a few changes between season 1 and season 2 that honestly not too fond of. I mean, obviously the art style, some people think that it's an amazing art style. Yeah, there are some. But for me personally, I always preferred the original art style. And on top of that, I also really enjoyed a lot of the different things that they put into these characters. One such thing is when we first really get to see Jake interacting with the giants, they specifically make them out to be these super peaceful, they're gentle giants. They're not, we will destroy you, this, that, and the other thing. No, they are just peaceful creatures who want to be left alone, just like most magical creatures. But in the second season, a few times there were giants that were, needless to say, not the best. Luckily, after rewatching it, I actually realized that no, it was mostly just them being pissed off and other magical creatures pissing them off. But yeah. Honestly, this show is amazing. There are absolutely some issues with the whole certain characters got really hijacked and there were a lot of things. But unlike other shows of the time, this didn't really feel as episodic as other shows. Even though it really was episodic, the characters developed over time, which I honestly thought was actually really interesting seeing it going on again. Because really, if you think about it, Jake rarely makes the same mistake twice. Compared to other things like early Ben 10, and well, I mean, even later Ben 10 when we actually get to see him and stuff, it complicated and stuff, but Ben makes the same mistakes multiple times over and over again. Meanwhile, Jake actually learns from his mistakes. And while it is absolutely episodic to a certain degree, an overarching story is still there. Yes, it's an enemy of the weak thing, but it honestly reminds me of Miraculous to a certain extent. And it's honestly kind of weird how similar it is. Both Jake and Marinette are Chinese immigrant children who one parent is, and actually, funnily enough, both mothers are the Chinese and are the Chinese descendant, and both fathers are the very white characters. Jake's dad is strongly American, and Marinette's dad is strongly French. But both of these aspects play into who Jake is. Yes, he has kind of gone away from his Chinese heritage, but he's grown into the heritage of America, which often happens with Americans, especially younger audiences and stuff. It's a bit complicated and I don't want to get into all of it right now because I don't know all the details. But basically, yeah, he grows and starts to learn more about his heritage, both Chinese and dragon. And I honestly love that aspect. And yes, absolutely, I do find some things annoying. But another interesting thing is that they actually handled the relationship surprisingly well. Jake is a flirt, as a lot of guys are around his age, but he also focuses on one girl. Especially when you're a young kid, or especially around that age, hyper focusing on one person happens a lot, actually. And realizing that that could be a problem is understandable, and you should realize that earlier on, because the fact is that not everyone's perfect. But I still absolutely love the relationship between Rose and Jake. They work so hard to actually make it work. And honestly, that's something that I actually do want to see the future of. We see Jake's future briefly in a few different episodes, or it might just be one, but we never really see much of it. The only episode that actually pops into mind is after Jake and his father face off against vampires that suck on the blood of dragons. Jake and his father go to the freaking go to the beach, and then we get a short little view forward to see Jake and his son as they're going on the same trip. And honestly, that's really, really cool. But like I said, there is one thing that I would like to see at some point, and that is the future of Jake. To see how he grew up. It's honestly a lot of the things that I feel for a lot of the different shows that I've loved for a long time. Not necessarily that we should get full series for these shows, but maybe like one season of each of these. Like, seeing Danny Phantom grow up and seeing his life with Sam and Tucker to see if they actually continue to go in that direction and if those relationships stuck for years to come. Honestly, that would have been really cool to get to see, and I personally would have loved it. And the same thing goes for Ben 10 and obviously American Dragon. Obviously, Ben 10 is a little bit of a different situation because we get to see what happens in his future a lot. But with American Dragon, something just honestly always felt odd to me. I felt like there had to be at some point where he was no longer just gonna be that American Dragon anymore, but instead was going to be passing on his knowledge to someone else. Honestly, what I would have absolutely loved is to see a sequel to American Dragon, where, and I mean, this is still technically a possibility, but to see a sequel where we get to see all of the characters again as they've grown up, and maybe there's like a little bit of information here and there just sprinkled in where certain characters do certain things and they're not as involved, but we get to see Jake as he's tutoring the next American Dragon. The person who's maybe not going to replace him, but maybe the person who is going to be the American Dragon somewhere else in the world. Honestly, one of the things that's constantly bugged me about how he's the American Dragon and Lao Shi was the Chinese Dragon is the fact that these are big countries. There's lots of other countries, like Jake being the first American Dragon. Okay, that makes sense. That's fine. But there are they specifically mention characters like the Canadian Dragon, Lao Shi was the Chinese Dragon, and so on and so forth. These countries vary in size very drastically. And while obviously they could primarily be focusing on one specific area, keep in mind that Haley's teacher is the Korean dragon. Probably South Korean, but not 100% certain. Uh, but the point is that, yeah, she was the Korean dragon. That is a much smaller area to cover. Meanwhile, here in America, like, if he's the American dragon, does that mean that he has to fly constantly between all of the different cities in America? Or is he only the New York dragon? Because we only really see him in New York and a little bit in New Jersey, but just thinking about that fact just leads me to wonder, shouldn't there be a San Franciscan dragon? Because they're on two opposite sides of the world, and I don't know if San Francisco is absolutely the best option. Maybe it should be LA, but one of those two cities I think should have at least their own dragon. But I don't know. There's multiple cities that I think could have had their own dragons. And there's honestly a lot of things that kind of confuse me. And the fact is that Lao Shi is more of the Hong Kong dragon, not the China dragon. Not he as far as we've seen, everything that he's done is in Hong Kong, not in other parts of the country. Like, he's not going to Shanghai, he's not going to this country or this. A lot of the countries that used to be part of China, he's just labeled as the Chinese dragon, and every single shot that we see him in his past, he's in Hong Kong. And when we go to China, he's specifically going to Hong Kong. He's not going to other countries and all this jazz. I don't know. There's a lot to it, and I really do think that they really should have developed that a little bit more, and maybe have had maybe earlier on, in maybe some point in the show, they could have had something like, Jake, it's time for you to meet the other American dragon, who is the dragon of the West Coast. I don't know. Something like that would have been really interesting, I think, and a lot of fans probably would have really enjoyed it as much as I would have. But I don't know. Honestly, I think that if we show them that we loved this show, I actually think that it could get a sequel. And not necessarily, oh, it's continuing from where they left off. No, 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 no. I don't want that. I think that the way they ended it was great. And if they were to do more, honestly, I don't think that they really could do more. They wrapped up a lot of things in that storyline. But having maybe one season where Jake and his new family, years in the future, go over to San Francisco to start or LA to start training the next American Dragon who will be taking care of things on that side, while maybe there's some other dragon that's also moving. Some we also have little hints and stuff that a new dragon family has moved in to New York, and we don't know this, and no, they don't know this, and we will only be guessing. But that family, we're hoping, will eventually become the next American Dragon, who's eventually going to replace Jake. I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that whole situation, and honestly, I would just love to see how they handle that. I don't know for sure, but I think that's something that we should realize. Yes, shows end with good endings and are well rounded out and finished very easily. But I absolutely do agree that some shows do need to have a sequel to just let us know what has happened in the past since we saw all of this stuff. A catch up season, a final season where we get to see how things have played out. Honestly, I think that Kipo was actually one of the best ways that they actually could have handled that. In Kipo, one of the things that we get to see at the very end of the series is obviously the last episode is mostly the final battle, but the rest of the episode is seeing Kipo and her family as they've grown older. Things have changed for sure, but they're now older and they've grown. And honestly, just seeing that actually makes me think that we don't ever need to see Kipo again. But there's always that one little lacking feature to know, did actually things play out well? I don't know. They don't necessarily have to have all of the same actors, especially since everyone would be grown up now, and I'm not 100% certain if all of them are still alive. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Would you want to see American Dragon come back? I don't know. But anyways, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and ring that notification bell. And of course, if you have any thoughts or theories, please leave them down in the comments below. If you are going to leave a theory, make sure to say theory review somewhere in your comment. And of course, if you do want to support the channel even more, then definitely head down to the description and check out all of our links down there, including our social medias and ways you can support us financially, including our Patreon, our merch store, and the book. And of course, if you do want to support the other channels, then definitely go down there as well and check them out and also subscribe. But anyways, guys, I have been Electro Ninja, and I will see you guys next time. But on!